In this recording, we're going to discuss the dermis, skin markings, and skin coloration. The dermis is a highly vascular layer that sits deep to the epidermis. It provides blood supply for the epidermis. It also contains sensory receptors, and it anchors the dermis in place. We have two distinct layers that we'll discuss. We have the papillary layer and then the reticular layer. And first comes the papillary layer. This is the more superficial of these two dermal layers. This is loose connective tissue. We have special collagen fibers that are found in this layer that basically their job is to be a junction point for the dermis and the epidermis. It basically anchors the epidermis to the dermis, kind of holds everybody together. We also find dermal papillae here. These are little tiny projections that are located at the surface of the papillary layer where it comes into contact with the epidermis. It kind of looks like the dermal papillae are pushing up into the epidermis. These papillae contain tiny blood vessels, the capillaries. They are arranged in little loop patterns, and they extend up into most of the superficial part of the dermal papillae themselves. So they kind of poke up into the papillae also. Why? Because, y'all, we still need oxygen and nutrients, okay? We're still trying to feed everybody, not just the dermis, but we've also got to feed that epidermal layer also, because remember the epidermis itself is avascular. We have another type of sensory receptor that lives here as well. These are called tactile corpuscles, or you might come across the term Meissner corpuscle. These are responding to light touch as well, and you find these on places that either do a lot of touching or that get touched a lot. So not only your fingertips and your lips, but also your face and your external genitalia. And we're going to leave it there. Now, your reticular layer. Okay, and this is the deeper of the two dermal layers. This layer is what separates the dermis from the hypodermis. We have dense irregular connective tissue here, and if you remember back to our histology discussion, the dense irregular connective tissue, those collagen bundles are just arranged very irregularly, just very chaotic looking, no rhyme or reason, no symmetry to them. But even though we don't have symmetry, we have strength. Okay, those collagen bundles provide strength to the dermis, prevents traumatic injuries from damaging deeper tissues below the dermis. We also find elastic fibers that allow the dermis to stretch and do recoil, so we can move around and our skin goes back in place once we're done. We have a lot of proteoglycans that live in your reticular layer as well that draw water into the ground substance. This keeps your skin firm and hydrated. And we have yet another type of sensory receptor. These are called lamellated corpuscles or Pachydiid corpuscles. Pachydian's kind of a fun word to say. These sensory receptors respond to deep pressure, touch, and vibrations that the skin might come across. So notice this one is not for fine touch. This one's deep pressure and vibrations. In addition to all of that, you also have more blood vessels, sweat glands, hair, sebaceous glands, adipose tissue. All of that's found in the reticular layer. So there's quite a bit going on in that reticular layer of your dermis. This is obviously a very simple version, okay? So you can see these little bumps. These are the dermal papillae in the papillary layer. These are the capillary loops that we talked about that project all the way up into the papilla. We talked about the tactile corpuscles. Here's your Pachydian corpuscle, the lamellated corpuscles. I think they look like little onions on a lollipop stick or something. But we've also got your blood vessels in the reticular layer as well. You can even see the lamellated corpuscle in the histological image. They're pretty. They kind of look like a hurricane. They've got the little center. It looks like an eye, kind of like a little hurricane. Okay, So, skin markings. Okay. You have small visible lines in the epidermis that are caused by an interaction between the dermis and the epidermis. You see these best in the thick skin of your palms, of your hands, your fingers, and you can even see these in the plantar surface of your feet and your toes. So your palms and your soles again. First of all, we have dermal ridges. These are found in places where your papillae are more prominent due to the presence of thick collagen bundles. They basically create indentations. They indent over the epidermis. They create epidermal ridges. Now, y'all know about these. You just might not have called them epidermal ridges before. These create certain patterns. We have 3 patterns: loops, arches, and whorls. Okay, you know these better as your fingerprints. Look at y'all putting stuff together. You also have sweat pores that open along these ridges. This is where the fingerprint itself comes from. Okay, you've got oil and sweat that ends up on these ridges, and then you touch something and you leave the oil and the sweat behind, and it makes this pattern. All right, we got a few other skin markings. We have tension, or sometimes called cleavage lines. These are gaps in between collagen bundles, particularly in the reticular layer of the dermis. These also create indentations in your epidermis, but we find these in places where you have joints. So your reticular layer is tightly anchored to your deeper structures, and this helps create these deep creases called flexure lines. So if you think of your like your elbow or your knee joint, anytime you flex the skin there, it has to be able to accommodate that movement, and so these collagen bundles are arranged in a way that we can still flex your skin without ripping and tearing every time we move at our joints. And then we have stretch marks. Sometimes you'll hear them termed stria. These occur because we have basically overstretched your dermis. You have stretched your dermis so far, so fast, that fibroblasts cannot keep up with forming new collagen and elastic fibers. So basically you overstretch it, and it leads to these marks, these stretch marks that have been created. And that's really all you're doing. You're just stretching your skin faster than it can make new skin to accommodate that. We tend to associate stretch marks as kind of like we kind of give them like a negative connotation. But stretch marks can be found in really anybody. It's not uncommon to see stretch marks in pregnant women because their bellies are growing really fast, or even just overweight people. That's kind of where the negative connotation comes in. But you can find these in professional athletes when they do bodybuilding and they really just want to they work out a lot and they're really just trying to build muscle and everything. If they build too quickly, then their skin can't keep up, and even they can have stretch marks. Also, like teenagers going through growth spurts, you're just literally growing faster than what your skin can keep up with. So they usually have like a negative connotation, but it's just your skin stretching. It's not a big deal. And then we have blisters. I'm sure that you are familiar with blisters. The skin has been damaged by friction. Fluid collects between the epidermis and the dermis itself. This fluid is trying to cushion the tissue underneath from further damage, allowing it to heal. But what usually happens, these blisters usually pop. And with the popping, the fluidy cushion goes away, and we usually just put band-aids on them and we kind of move along. But that's the purpose of the blister, is to kind of cushion and prevent further damage. So try to keep your blisters intact. Now, that was skin markings. Now we're going to do skin colorations. The first skin pigmentation that we have, we've mentioned melanin previously. We talked about the melanocytes in the stratum basal layer of our epidermis. We said that this pigment can range from an orangish to a reddish to a brown or black protein pigment. There's lots of variety there for melanin production. The keratinocytes that are still alive, the DNA that lives within those keratinocytes is subject to damage by UV radiation. The melanin is trying to protect against damage from from UV radiation to hurt our DNA. We have two main types of UV radiation to worry about. UVA rays penetrate both your epidermis and your dermis. UVB rays only penetrate your epidermis. But the melanin, again, one of the things that it does is try to prevent damage from the UV rays themselves. Melanin synthesis increases with exposure to UV radiation. This increases the pigmentation itself, so we usually just call this tanning. People of all skin pigmentations can develop sunburns, and they are at a risk of skin cancer. So it doesn't really matter how little or how much melanin you are producing. Everybody is at risk of skin burns and skin cancer. So we do have to use caution. Now, a secondary function for that melanin, is to reduce the synthesis of vitamin D in response to UV radiation. This leads to less calcium ion absorption and maintenance of calcium ion homeostasis within a normal range. So we talked about the importance of vitamin D synthesis with regards to the absorption of calcium from your small intestine, but everything ultimately goes back to homeostasis, so we don't need excess calcium. So one of the other functions of the melanin is to reduce the synthesis of vitamin D in response to the UV radiation. So we're still trying to create enough vitamin D to have adequate calcium absorption, but just because we are exposing ourselves to the sunlight doesn't necessarily mean that we need to drastically increase calcium absorption as well. And so if you actually have too much calcium in your body, that can also cause problems. And so the melanin is trying to balance that. Okay, we need a little bit, but we don't want too much. Now, we got a couple other common pigmentations. You've got freckles. These are small areas of increased pigmentation. This comes from increased melanin production, okay, in certain spots. These are not to be confused with moles, which are sometimes called nevus or nevus. These are also increased areas of pigmentation, but the root cause is different. Moles are created because of the proliferation of melanocytes themselves. So you're not making more melanin, you are making more melanocytes. So you end up having more melanin. But that is also one of the reasons that moles tend to, not always, but tend to be raised and freckles aren't. Okay, so freckles, you're just, it's kind of like adding a little bit of ink to the surface of your skin. But here, a mole, you are literally creating new cells. And so, kind of like a tiny, tiny tumor. Okay, because you do have cell growth here. And then we have albinism, which is basically the lack of skin pigmentation. Okay, so your melanocytes do not function properly. This increases your risk of damage from UV radiation. The most notable place to really see the lack of pigmentation is obviously the skin, but you can also see it in hair and even in the irises of your eyes. Now we got a few more skin pigmentations to chat about. We've got carotene and hemoglobin. Carotene is a yellow-orange pigment found in your food, specifically in yellow and orange foods like egg yolks, orange vegetables, like what's orange? Like, I don't know, orange bell peppers. These will impart slightly orangish, yellowish colors to your skin. So if you only ever eat, I don't know, sweet potatoes and egg yolks and orange bell peppers, and I literally can't think of any more yellow and orange vegetables. But if you only eat these things, you can turn orange. This is kind of common in babies. Because like sweet potatoes, they're sweet, right? Like every baby likes sweet potatoes, and babies are kind of picky. So once they find something they like, moms and dads are like, oh my god, let's just feed them this, and then before they know it, their baby is orange. It's fine, just start feeding them something else. They'll turn back to their normal color. People just look at you funny for a little bit. But okay, so that's carotene. Hemoglobin. This is found in your red blood cells. The hemoglobin itself contains iron. This is what your oxygen binds to, so we can transport your oxygen on your red blood cells. The hemoglobin, the effect of your skin color is more indirect because this is located in your blood vessels that flow to your dermis. And so if we increase blood flow to your dermis, then you get the red coming out a little bit more. If we decrease blood flow to your dermis, you lose a little bit of that red coloration. Erythema is what we're just mentioning. So when you increase the blood flow to your dermis, this does give your skin more of a reddish appearance. This is perfectly normal a lot of times. So think of when you exercise. So you're going to increase blood flow really to everywhere, but that includes your dermis. And so a lot of times you'll look very, your face will get red and things like that if you work out a lot. Or like if you get really hot, your face tends to get red. But other things can cause erythema as well, including trauma, fever, and even an infection. So one of the classic signs of inflammation is redness at the site of infection. Pallor is basically the opposite. So if we decrease blood flow to the dermis, we lose that reddening from the blood itself, and so you tend to look a little bit more white. This is normal when you're trying to conserve heat. So think about like your fingers and your toes can get really pale and cold when it gets cold outside because all that blood flow is going to your internal organs instead. This can also occur when you get really nervous or during like a fight or flight response. And so like think about like if you get really, really scared, sometimes like there's a saying, you turn white as a ghost when you get really, really scared, and that's kind of this pallor. All the blood is like gone from your face, and you look more white. You could also turn blue. Yeah, you could be blue. So cyanosis is the most logical reason for you turning blue. This really indicates that you have very low levels of oxygen. That's bad, that you need immediate attention and an oxygen tank. We need to get some oxygen back into your body. Once we do that, you should perk right up. But until that happens, your fingers, your lips, things like that, your skin as a whole can turn a little blue. You could suffer from this condition, methemoglobinemia, which is hard to say, y'all. Methemoglobinemia. This is a genetic condition that was prevalent in a family, the Fugates of Kentucky. This condition, it really just made their skin blue. This is not an altered image. It's not, somebody didn't drop something on it and stain it. These people were blue. It's not super, super rare, but it does happen. And then this guy, y'all look, You could suffer from something called argyria or silver poisoning. So any kind of prolonged exposure to silver can turn you blue. Look, like that, just don't do that, right? Wear gloves or something, protect yourself, okay? We try not to judge, we try. Okay, jaundice. You could turn yellow, okay? This is most notably seen in the whites of your eyes, but if this gets bad enough, your whole skin will look yellow. This is caused by an increased level of bilirubin accumulation in your blood. A lot of times this comes from a liver problem, so your liver's supposed to break down bilirubin, and so if your liver starts to fail, the bilirubin just builds up and it gives your skin and your eyes this yellow appearance. So jaundice is not usually great. Bronzing caused by Addison's disease. This is not the same thing as you like getting a tan, okay? This is caused by low levels of steroid hormones, like cortisol, things like that. You can see here in the gums this discoloration. And then vitiligo is kind of interesting because you lose pigmentation in your skin, but it's in patches. And so this person is suffering from vitiligo, and so just randomly just lose coloration. We really don't know what causes vitiligo.